There comes a moment in every person's life when the world goes quiet, not peacefully, but painfully. When the people you counted on disappear, when your bank account reflects your worst fears, and when your body is running on nothing but sheer will. That moment is not your ending. That moment is your beginning. This speech is for the ones who built their dreams in the dark. No applause, no support, no safety net. It's for the person who kept showing up when showing up felt impossible. You didn't have a mentor. You didn't have money. You didn't have anyone holding your hand through the storm. But you had you, and that turned out to be enough. The world celebrates success, but rarely honors the silent suffering behind it. Nobody talks about the nights you cried and still set your alarm. Nobody talks about the hunger, not just for food, but for proof that it would all be worth it. This is that proof. This is the testimony of every soul who dared to rise alone, broke and exhausted, and made it anyway. There is something the world will never fully understand about a person who builds alone. No cosign. No cheerleader. No one sending a "How are you holding up?" text at 2 in the morning when the weight of everything becomes almost too heavy to carry. Just you, four walls, and a dream that refuses to die no matter how many times reality tries to bury it. Most people need someone beside them to take the next step. But you learned to move in silence, because silence was all you were given. When the support system you expected never showed up, something unexpected happened instead. You stopped waiting. You stopped looking over your shoulder for permission, for encouragement, for someone to tell you that you were on the right path. You built the path yourself, stone by stone, day by day, with cracked hands and a tired mind. And with every step you took alone, you became less dependent on the world's approval and more anchored in your own unshakable sense of purpose. Solitude has a way of stripping everything fake away. When there is no audience, there is no performance. When there is no one watching, the only person you have to be honest with is yourself. That is where real growth lies. Not in the motivated Monday mornings surrounded by hype, but in the Wednesday nights when nothing is going right, and you still choose to get back to work. Those invisible moments, those unseen hours, are where your character was being carved into something extraordinary. People talk about self-made like it is a badge of arrogance. It is not. It is a badge of survival. It means that when the odds were stacked, when the room was empty, when the resources were gone, you found a way. You were the investor, the mentor, the motivator, and the muscle all at once. You wore every hat because there was no one else to wear them. And somewhere in that exhausting, lonely process, you discovered a version of yourself that comfort and company could never have revealed. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire, and the loneliest roads produce the most resilient travelers. Every great person who ever stood on a stage, accepted an award, or built something the world admires. Many of them had a season of complete and total solitude where no one was clapping and nothing was working. That season did not break them. It built them, just like it is building you right now, in ways you may not even be able to see yet. And here is what solitude quietly teaches you that no classroom, no mentor, and no motivational playlist ever could. It teaches you that you are enough. Not almost enough. Not enough if you had better resources, or better connections, or a better start. Enough, exactly as you are, exactly where you are. Because if you could survive the silence, if you could keep going when no one was watching, if you could be your own reason on the days when every reason seemed to disappear, then imagine what you are capable of when the weight starts to lift. And the weight always lifts. But before it does, there is still the matter of what it feels like to look at your account and see nothing staring back at you, you said. Keynote 2. Expand. There is a specific kind of pain that comes with being broke that people who have never lived it cannot fully explain. It is not just the empty wallet or the account balance that makes your stomach drop. It is the embarrassment of having to say no when everyone around you seems to be saying yes. It is the mental math you do before every decision, every meal, every bill, every basic human need turned into a calculation you were never supposed to be making. It is the way poverty quietly attacks your dignity long before it attacks your finances. And yet, somehow, you kept your head up through all of it. What most people never talk about is how being broke forces a kind of clarity that wealth simply cannot buy. When you have nothing, you learn exactly what matters. You learn who is really in your corner. You learn the difference between want and need, between noise and necessity, between people who were there for the lifestyle and people who were there for you. Scarcity, as brutal as it is, becomes a filter. And everything that survives that filter, every relationship, every goal, every reason you kept going, is real. Unquestionably, undeniably real. Money was never the foundation of your dream. It was just the thing everyone told you that you needed before you could start. But you started anyway. You built with what you had, which some days was nothing more than time, will, and a refusal to let circumstance write your ending. You found ways. You stretched what little you had further than it was ever supposed to go. You got creative in ways that people with full pockets never had to be. And that creativity, that resourcefulness born out of necessity, became one of your greatest hidden strengths. There is something deeply powerful about a person who looks at an empty hand and still chooses to keep playing the game. Because being broke could have made you bitter. It could have made you resentful, small, and convinced that the world was designed against you. And maybe parts of it were. But bitterness was a luxury you refused to afford. Instead, you took the pressure of having nothing and used it the way a diamond uses pressure. To become something that cannot be ignored, something that cannot be broken, something with a value the world will eventually have no choice but to recognize. You have to understand that every person you look up to, every entrepreneur, every artist, every leader who seems untouchable today, many of them have a broke chapter. A chapter where the lights were off, where the phone was disconnected, where meals were skipped and pride was swallowed daily. That chapter is not a shameful footnote in their story. It is the very reason their story is worth telling. And your broke chapter is not the evidence that you failed. It is the evidence that you started, that you dared to pursue something bigger than your current circumstances could comfortably support. Because here is the truth about poverty that no one frames correctly. It is a starting point, not a stopping point. It is a season with a beginning and, more importantly, an end. It does not define your intelligence, your worth, your potential, or your destiny. It defines only where you were, never where you are going. The ones who make it out are not always the most talented or the most connected. They are the ones who refuse to let a bank balance become a belief system. They are the ones who kept dreaming in the dark, kept working without guarantees, kept showing up even when showing up cost them everything they had left. And speaking of everything you had left, there came a point where your body itself began to send you a message you could no longer ignore. You said, Keynote 3, EXP, there is a kind of tired that sleep cannot fix. Not the tired that comes from a long day or a hard week, but the tired that settles into your bones after months, sometimes years, of pouring everything you have into something that has not yet shown you a return. It is the tired of carrying a vision alone. The tired of pushing forward on an empty tank, past every logical reason to stop, past every voice, internal and external, telling you that enough is enough. And yet, every single morning you got up. Not because it was easy. Not because you felt ready. But because something deeper than exhaustion kept pulling you forward. What most people misunderstand about fatigue is that it is not a sign of weakness. It is a receipt. It is proof of work done in rooms no one else entered, at hours no one else kept, under pressures no one else felt. Every ounce of exhaustion you carry is a record of your effort, a record that no one may ever see, no one may ever acknowledge, but one that exists in the most permanent place possible, inside you. In the discipline you built when rest would have been easier. In the habits you maintained when motivation had long abandoned you. Your tiredness is not your failure. It is your testimony. There is a dangerous lie that productivity culture sells, that rest is weakness, that slowing down means falling behind, that the moment you pause, someone hungrier is passing you. And so you pushed. You pushed through the headaches, through the emotional exhaustion, through the days when your mind was so fogged you could barely think straight, but you showed up anyway because stopping felt like losing. But here is what that relentless pushing quietly taught you. It taught you the difference between quitting and resting. It taught you that a warrior who sleeps is not a warrior who surrenders. Recovery is not retreat. It is preparation for the next fight. Because the body keeps score. Every sleepless night, every skipped meal, every moment of stress absorbed in silence, your body recorded all of it. And there were moments, honest moments, where the exhaustion became so total that the tears came not from sadness, but from sheer physical and emotional depletion. Those were not your weakest moments. Those were your most human moments. The moments where you sat with the full weight of what you were attempting and felt every pound of it. And then, somehow, you stood back up. Not dramatically. Not with a speech or a soundtrack. You just stood back up, the way tired people do. Quietly, stubbornly, and without waiting to feel better first. Exhaustion tried to tell you a story about your limits. But you kept rewriting the ending. Every time you thought you had reached the wall, you found that the wall was not solid. It was a test, disguised as an obstacle, designed to separate the ones who wanted it from the ones who needed it. And you needed it. Not wanted it like a preference, but needed it like oxygen. Like the alternative was a version of yourself you were simply unwilling to become. That need, that deep unshakable need, became the engine that exhaustion could slow but never fully stop. And while your body was learning to survive the storm, your mind was quietly fighting its own battle, a battle that had nothing to do with energy and everything to do with belief. There is a particular silence that surrounds you when no one believes in what you are doing. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of absence, the absence of encouragement, of enthusiasm, of someone looking at your dream and saying, "Yes, I see it too." People smiled politely and changed the subject. People offered unsolicited advice that was really just doubt dressed in concern. And some people, the ones you least expected, simply disappeared, because your ambition made them uncomfortable, because your refusal to settle reminded them of chances they never took. And you stood in the middle of all that silence, holding a vision that only you could see, wondering some nights if the fact that no one else could see it meant that it was not really there. But here is what that season of zero validation forced you to build: an internal compass so strong, so deeply rooted, that it no longer needed outside confirmation to keep pointing forward. Most people never develop this. Most people live their entire lives adjusting their dreams based on the reactions of others, shrinking when they sense doubt, expanding only when they receive applause. You had no applause. So instead of building a dream that performed for an audience, you built one that answered to something far more demanding and far more honest: your own soul. And a dream accountable to the soul is nearly impossible to kill, because it does not die when the crowd leaves. It does not even flinch. Self-belief in the absence of evidence is one of the rarest and most powerful forces a human being can possess. Anyone can believe in themselves when the results are visible, when the momentum is building, when the wins are stacking up and people are starting to take notice. That is not faith. That is confirmation. Real belief, the kind that changes lives and defies statistics, is the belief you carry in the dark. Before the proof. Before the breakthrough. before a single person in your life has updated their opinion of what you are capable of. That is the belief you were forced to find, not because it was handed to you, but because without it, there was simply nothing else left to stand on. And standing on that belief, alone, with no external support beneath your feet, you did something that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You became your own evidence. Every day you kept going was a data point. Every obstacle you outlasted was a proof of concept. Every moment you chose faith over fear, action over paralysis, forward over backward. You were building a case, brick by brick, that you were exactly who you believed yourself to be. The world had not yet caught up to what you already knew. But you were not waiting for the world anymore. You had stopped needing the verdict from outside the courtroom because you had already decided the outcome from within. And while you were busy becoming your own proof, something else was quietly taking shape beneath the surface of all that pain, something that was never just about you to begin with, you said. Keynote 5. Expand it, and everything you went through was never just your story. The nights you cried alone, the mornings you forced yourself up, the years you spent invisible to the world but relentless in your pursuit, none of it was wasted, and none of it was only meant for you. There is someone, right now, standing at the exact crossroads where you once stood, broke, exhausted, unseen, and dangerously close to giving up. And your story? The one you lived in silence, the one that cost you everything, that is the story that is going to reach across the darkness and pull them back from the edge. You did not survive the solitude just to keep it to yourself. You did not outlast the poverty, push through the exhaustion, and build belief from nothing just to arrive at success and go quiet. The pain you carried has a purpose that is bigger than your personal victory. Every scar you earned in that season of struggle is now a map that someone else desperately needs to find their way through their own impossible chapter. Your mess became your message. Your test became your testimony. And the very things you were once ashamed of are now the most powerful tools you possess. So let this be the moment you understand the full weight of what you have accomplished. You did it alone. You did it broke. You did it tired. And you did it anyway, not just for yourself, but for every person who will ever look at your life and dare to believe in theirs. You said, is speech PMAG.